I have been reading wrong my entire life. After reading the book How to Read by Motimer J. Adler, I now know how much more there is to reading than I thought possible. In this video, I will go over the main ideas brought about in the book so that you can start reading more effectively as well. Timestamps will be in the description, so feel free to skip to any part. Reading is like learning to ski. When an expert does it, both reading and skiing are graceful. However, when done by a beginner, both are awkward, frustrating, or slow. I think learning to ski is one of the most humiliating experiences you can go through. I am speaking from experience. It's the same way with reading. You have probably been reading for a long time, and starting to learn again might seem a little daunting. I remember first reading the book and thinking, this book thinks I don't know how to read. The sad thing is it was right. And it's not just me, but most of the people in the world. A few months ago, I was sitting in the living room of my house enjoying Game of Thrones when my mom walked in and asked me if she would like the book. I laughed and told her she would probably like The Untethered Soul more. She just stood there staring for a couple of seconds. So I asked her why she was just standing there. She told me that she was trying to figure out if she read that book in the last couple of years or not. And I remember when I heard that just thinking, why are we so bad at remembering or retaining what we read from books? I knew then and there that I had to stop this terrible cycle of forgetting. If you don't know how to read, most of what you consume will be ineffectual. I'm not gonna lie, it's going to suck and it's going to be humiliating at times. But learning to read is a humbling and enlightening experience. The 4 levels of reading. When it comes to reading, Adler explains that there are 4 interdependent and essential levels. These are the elementary, inspectional, analytical, and synoptical reading. The first level of reading is elementary reading. It's so called because it's the reading that most of us learn how to do in elementary school. In mastering this level, one goes from non-literary to beginning literacy. You learn to acquire initial reading skills, learn the rudiments of reading, and figure out what is said in a passage. However, elementary readers cannot form deeper relations with the text. While they might understand what occurs in a particular passage, they struggle to create a cohesive narrative out of multiple sections and develop no deeper relationship with the books they read. To elementary readers, books are books. Before reading How to Read, I would sit down with a literary crate like Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. As I read, I felt my mind expand. Every word making me smarter and smarter. I was a goddamn god. Then I read it again after reading the book and realized, wow, I literally took away nothing from the book the first time through. This is the conundrum of elementary readers. You're not capable of taking away profound lessons and introspections as you don't even know the process of doing so. A process that first begins with the second level of reading. Adler explains that the first level of inspectional reading is systematic skimming or pre-reading. At this level, the main goal is to learn if the book is even worth reading. Most books are bad. It's your job to figure out whether a book is worth reading beforehand by skimming or pre-reading it. Even if you end up reading the book, the process will help you understand the book's overall structure as well. It also allows you to separate the dry sections from the real kernels of nourishment. Not every part of every book deserves your reading. Before reading How to Read, I felt obligated to finish a book if I picked it up. I'm actually scared at what would have happened if someone handed me a religious text of some sort and I opened up the first page. I probably would still be going through it to this day. If you don't believe a section of a book resonates with you, there is no shame in putting it down and leaving it for another day or forever. This systematic skimming or pre-reading can be done in a variety of ways. First, look at the title page and, if the book has one, its preface. Study the table of contents and try to understand the book's general structure. Check the index if the book has one to quickly estimate the range of topics that the book will talk about. Finally, look at the chapters that seem pivotal to the book's argument or analysis and pre-read the first couple of sentences, last couple of sentences, or whichever paragraphs catch your eye. The point is not to read the entire book, but to get a general sense of what you will be delving into upon actually reading it. Adler explains that the second level of inspectional reading is superficial reading. Superficial reading is the art of reading at different speeds based on the text. I once asked a friend at the Cornell dining hall what his strategy was toward reading different texts. He just told me that he, reads, plain and simple. People like this read every text and piece of information in much the same way. The issue is that the types of text drastically changes the way that you should tackle reading it. Reading a short and deep poem, for instance, should not be read in the same way as a literary epic like the Iliad. Every book or piece of information contains sections of material that can and should be read very quickly. They also, however, contain information that should be read slowly and contemplated on. This is where the art of superficial reading comes in. Let's start by talking about how you can read more quickly by discussing the eye's science. Whether we notice it or not, the eyes are constantly shifting in tiny bursts and are blind while moving. This leads to two common things happening while reading: fixations and regressions. Fixations are when our eyes get stuck on a word or when we revert to previously read words or sentences while reading. The eyes of untrained or young readers will often regress as many as 5 or 6 times in the course of each line of text they read. This slows down the reading speed of most people to a painful slog as they reread the exact words and sentences over and over again without realizing it. This, of course, begs the question of how we stop these regressions while reading. Luckily, it's actually pretty easy to fix with a good 15 minutes of practice. Place your thumb and first 2 fingers together. Then sweep this pointer across a line of type, a little faster than it is comfortable for your eyes to move. Force yourself to keep up with your hand. You will very soon read the words as you follow your hand. Keep practicing this. Keep increasing the speed at which your hand moves, and before you know it, you'll have doubled or tripled your reading speed. My dad actually mastered this ability once in his life when he read an entire novel while driving to Montana. He just propped it up on the driving wheel and read the whole way. Now, I know you might be saying that is a dumb idea, and to that I say, yes, it was very dumb. It's important to note that reading faster doesn't let us comprehend things easier. If you find a tough question in a book, you must slow down if you want to truly understand it. Superficial reading is an art. Sometimes you'll want to skip over vast amounts of text or skim over it for the general gist. Other times you'll want to slow down to a trot and soak in everything that you're reading. So far, we've talked about elementary and inspectional reading. Of course, most of us have hopefully done elementary reading, and probably a good amount of us have tried inspectional reading of some sort. The next reading level is something I guarantee is over most people's heads, considering it was definitely over mine the first time I read the book. Analytical reading. Adler explains that there are 4 essential questions that you must find out of any book you want to understand. What is the book about as a whole? What is being said in detail and how? Is the book true in whole or in part? And finally, what of it? These are the types of questions that reading analytically helps to answer. To do this, Adler brings up a set of rules to follow while analytically reading to serve as a guide to answering these questions. The first rule is that you must know what kind of book you're reading, and you should know this as early in the process as possible, preferably before you even sit down to read. Like said beforehand, different types of books and information require entirely different types of reading. For example, the rate to read a book on math or science will be completely different from how you read a novel. There are 2 broad types of books: expository and imaginative. Expository books primarily convey knowledge through theories, opinions, hypotheses, or speculations. This includes works that range from math/science to philosophy and history. Imaginative books work to convey emotions and experiences through some narrative. This includes works like novels, poems, plays, or fiction. Expository works are split into two more categories: theoretical or practical. Adler describes theoretical books as books that teach you that something is the case. Practical books, however, teach you what to do with the knowledge of theoretical works. A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking, a book that describes the history of the universe and modern astrophysics, is purely theoretical as it doesn't point you to do anything with the information it discusses. However, how-to books like How to Read, the book that we're talking about, or opinionated books of any sort are all practical as they either directly or indirectly point you to do something differently in your behaviors. Adler points out that the first and easiest way to start making these distinctions is by analyzing the book's title. It seems obvious, I know, but many people forget to start with this critical step. Tell me what the title of Charles Darwin's famous book on evolution is called. Don't worry, I'll wait. It's not unlikely that you said The Origin of the Species. The actual title, however, is The Origin of Species. The difference is astronomical. The first title would imply an exploration of the evolution of just the human species, whereas the second title would allude to an exploration of species as a whole. By analyzing the title, you can usually differentiate if a book is historical, scientific, or philosophical. Historical books typically have the word history in the title or allude to something in the past. If you can't tell from the title, they usually convey a feeling of narrative throughout the book, much like many imaginative literature pieces. Differentiating between science and philosophy can be done with a simple rule. If a theoretical or practical book deals with things outside of your typical daily experience, you probably deal with a scientific book. This is because scientific books include information that you can only reproduce in a laboratory. The second rule of analytical reading is to state the unity of the whole book in a single sentence. The idea is to give the briefest and most comprehensive summary of a book in as little as 2 to 3 sentences. Knowing the book's general structure makes it much easier to come to understand the book as you read it. Without a view of what the book is saying as a whole, your brain has to figure out what is being said in a particular chapter and how it fits into the overall picture. This wastes valuable brain power that you could use to comprehend what you're reading in the first place. Once you have discovered the unity of a book, you can move on to the third rule of analytical reading. Set forth the major parts of the book and show how they're organized to one another and the unity of the whole. The third rule of the book involves figuring out how the parts of the book come together to create unity, but you must first come to terms with the author. A term is simply an unambiguous word. There are many words in the English language that have multiple meanings based on when you use them. If you don't come to terms with the author, you will be unable to interpret exactly what they are trying to say. So how do we find those words while reading through a book? Find the essential words for the author and then determine the specific meaning of those words. One easy way to do this is to mark the words that trouble you. You can also look for stresses that the author puts on certain words and not others. They may use quotation marks or italics or even bold to signify important words. Even better, they might straight up state the importance of a specific meaning of a word they will be using in the text. Unfortunately, once you have found the word, there's no other way to determine what they mean other than using the context of the rest of the paragraph or just using a dictionary. Adler states that the final goal of all reading is to determine what the author's message is. This brings us to the fourth rule of analytical reading. Find out what the author's problems are. If you can figure out what questions the author posed at the beginning of the book, you can guess that the book will contain the answers somewhere inside. Most of the time, the author will not explicitly state the questions for you. which means it's your task to figure out what they even are. We must mark the meaningful sentences in a book and discover the propositions they contain. Propositions are simply answers to questions. This requires that one has come to terms with the author. Otherwise, you might misinterpret the proposition. Reading is like learning. Seems like a simple sentence. But in one sense, you could mean learning as the acquisition of information or the development of understanding. The sentence is identical, but the propositions are different because the terms are not the same. After figuring out the problems, you must find out the author's solutions to those problems. How to Read, for example, is a book that juggles the problems of reading more effectively. So, we've finished all of these previous steps because we want to understand the author. We want to understand them so that we can bash their book into the ground. We want to be able to deconstruct every single one of their arguments and ruin their literary career forever. Leave them in the dust and take their spot as, I'm just joking. We want to understand the author because criticizing a book requires that you first understand them. You will likely let your own biases and beliefs shine through if you don't. There are 4 things you can say when attacking an author's message once you understand. The author is uninformed, the author is misinformed, the author is illogical, or the analysis is incomplete. The author being uninformed means they don't have all the information necessary to give a comprehensive analysis. The author being misinformed means they said some things that just weren't true. The author being illogical means they didn't form a logical argument with their book. The author's analysis being incomplete means they didn't finish or answer everything they promised at the start of the book. If you can't find one of these 4 things to attack a book for, there's no other option but to agree. You can't say, I see nothing wrong with your argument, but still think you're wrong. If you can learn to read analytically, you are above 99.9% of readers when it comes to comprehension. That said, there is still one more level to reading that, if mastered, will lead to some of the best insights of your life. Synoptical reading. Adler explains that the last and most challenging reading level is synoptical reading. It requires effective use of all 3 levels underneath it. Synoptical reading is reading a series of books on one topic or idea and analyzing where they differ to reach a more informed conclusion. Many authors have differing views of things, and reading just one book on one topic can lead to your thoughts becoming biased or one-sided. If you have managed to make it this far into the video, then I would 100% recommend you pick up the book for itself and learn more about the concept of synoptical reading, as Adler does a much better job of explaining it than I ever could. The power of reading. Reading is one of the most rewarding and fulfilling things you can do with your time, but that is if you do it effectively. There are so many people in the world who don't know how to read inspectionally, and much more that don't even read. What fascinates me about reading compared to other hobbies is its timeless nature. The body does not continue indefinitely to grow in strength and develop in skill and grace. By the time most people are 30 years old, their bodies are as good as they'll ever be. In fact, many people's bodies have become to deteriorate by that time. But there is no limit to the amount of growth and development that the mind can sustain. All we have to do is connect new information with things we've learned in the past through a concept known as elaboration. This makes every book that much more fun to read. Through implementing the principles outlined in the book, I know that I am giving my mind an upgrade. Like training my muscles in the gym, I'm working out my brain with every book I consume, becoming wiser as a result. If you like this video, be sure to check out my video on my note-taking process in Rome research, as it takes in many of these concepts into mind when I take notes on the books I read. As always, have a fantastic day, and bye-bye.